Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Congratulations. You have made it to the end of what has been one of the more frustrating, disappointing, rage-inducing Browns seasons in recent memory. You had the tremendous failure of a quarterback who is getting paid $230 million guaranteed in Deshaun Watson. You had the breakdown of what was the offensive line that once carried this team to a playoff victory. You watched them pretty much break down completely and not even resemble a shell of their old selves. In turn, you watched this Browns team, which was the first team since 99, or at least the first run since 99, where the Browns had like a legit kind of identity. You saw that breakdown. You saw Nick Chubb come back from injury, and then he got injured again. Thankfully, not a serious injury. You saw Mike Hall get injured in his last game of the season, which is just so frustrating for him because this is a guy who has had his career start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And like, to his credit, he has not looked like a dude whose career has start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Because every time he gets out there, he shows something. Hopefully he recovers from his injury and he's able to get back on track with everything and get started on what should be a hell of a year two for Michael Hall. We have watched a lot of things, right? Some of you guys have come into the season with trust in Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski and are leaving it, at the very least, very skeptical of Andrew Berry or Kevin Stefanski, or you might be outright hostile to the idea of those guys keeping their job. This season has changed us. This season has taken its toll. But give us one moment to take a deep breath. Exhale. Take one more deep breath. Exhale. You know what? One more deep breath. Exhale. And reward yourself for getting through this year. If you've watched 17 of these post-game shows, 17 of these post-game shows, if you showed up to 17 of my streams, give yourself a pat on the back because you deserve it. Because this has been a tough year. This has been a year that's tested your faith and your love of the Cleveland Browns. Some of you guys pretty much gave up. That's okay. We're in the off season now. 2024 is now in the past. Now the Browns get to focus on fixing what went wrong in this season. And a lot of things did go wrong. The main thing that went wrong is the quarterback position, right? You got very underwhelming performances from, I would say, almost every quarterback who played for the most part. There was a point where Jameis Winston was actually overperforming, and then Jameis Winston kind of just looked like Jameis Winston after a while. I don't think he underperformed. I think he looked like Jameis. But you got an underperformance from Deshaun Watson that was so bad, and then he popped his Achilles, so you can't trust him going forward. DTR obviously not going to be anything for the team, and then Bailey Zapp threw an interception to a 400-pound Michael Pierce. All-time hilarious interception. Part of me is furious that Jameis Winston didn't get the chance to throw an interception because that seems like something Jameis would do. But absolutely, tough go for the Cleveland Browns this year. Absolutely, quarterback played a massive role into it. Now, when you look at this offseason, there are some solutions that could potentially be a duct tape solution at quarterback. There aren't a lot of long-term solutions at the quarterback position. I've talked about this at length in plenty of videos this last week, but there's just not a long-term solution available at quarterback. I think there are some of us who would really like it if there was a long-term solution available, especially because the Browns have a top 3 pick. But Right now, as the draft board stands, the top two quarterbacks are Shador Sanders and Cam Ward. I don't think any of those guys are intriguing enough prospects to justify a first round pick, especially in the top 10 with. And then you're looking at pretty much journeymen across the board in free agency. Now, a journeyman can be fine for you, right? A journeyman can work out for you. I don't think a journeyman would be the worst thing for the Cleveland Browns next year. Anything that the Browns do at the quarterback position this offseason needs to straddle the line of being better than what they got out of Watson, which was not that difficult of a bar to clear, and also be something that can be a temporary solution. You're looking at Kirk Cousins. You're looking at maybe giving a flyer to a Kyle Trask, or you're looking at Justin Fields or something like that, or pairing up a Kirk Cousins with a move like that. Maybe you go after Malik Willis and you get Kirk Cousins, but, you're probably looking at Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, like somebody you feel like at the end of the day, if you needed to start them, you don't feel terrible about starting them. You just don't feel great. And look, there's going to be no name that I'm going to bring up about starting at the quarterback position for the Cleveland Browns, especially established veterans, that isn't going to come with its own baggage. Right. Kirk Cousins comes with all the Kirk Cousins baggage. If you bring in like Aaron Rodgers, he comes with a ton of baggage. That's just going to be what it is. In the NFL, it's important to remember you're never as good as you think you are. You're never as bad as you think you are. And that applies to players too, right? Is Kirk Cousins cooked? It looks like it, but we thought Russ was cooked before he started playing this year, and it looks like Russ has a couple more years left in him. So maybe if Kirk Cousins gets back to a system with a coach that he's had success with, maybe he can look better. Maybe the Browns can get, something out of somebody like Jacoby Brissett. There are some options for the Browns to look at. None of these options are going to be overwhelmingly exciting. There's just not that this year. None of the quarterbacks in this draft class, if they draft them, I would be confident could take over, start for you in year one, and solve your quarterback problem. None of the free agents or trade guys that they could probably get their hands on are going to be overwhelmingly amazing selections to start for you at the position. Is what it is. You got to find a way to get better than Deshaun Watson and somebody who plays as well as Jameis or close to as well as Jameis while also not turning the ball over as much as Jameis Winston did. That's going to be the task, right? Can you get average to mediocre quarterback play or mediocre to average quarterback play out the position this year? You should be able to do it. This offseason, because from all accounts, it doesn't seem like Kevin or Andrew Berry are going to be on the hot seat. And again, I get people are going to feel how they feel about that. When you win 3 games, people aren't going to be excited to hear the coach is coming back, no matter who that coach is. You can win 2 Super Bowls. You win 3 games. Everybody in that city is probably going to want you fired. Now, is that what should happen? That's a different question. But I understand why people are upset, why people want the coach fired. It makes sense. They won 3 games. But I don't know if that's the most... How do I put this? I get that that's probably the path that a lot of people want to go on because that's what you're used to doing when you win 3 games. I don't know if that's the most practical option because I don't know how valued this job would be. And at the end of the day, Kevin's better than a lot of options you can get at the head coaching position. And the GM spot is just would be so difficult to replace because I don't think anybody's going to want to inherit the task of being in charge of moving on from Watson, right? Like that's going to be a mess that Andrew Berry has to dig himself out of. And we're going to see what Andrew Berry's made of this offseason. A lot of questions about him, right? His draft history we'll go into. I'm working on a video that should release in the next few weeks about what his draft history objectively looks like when you measure it based on some things. But it's been up and down. There's nothing definitive about Andrew Berry. This is going to be the offseason that defines him. If he's able to make some shrewd selections in the draft, if he's able to make some good free agency signings, get the Browns to a place where they're a competitive playoff team next year, well, then Andrew Berry looks like he's going to be your guy. If he's not able to do that, if he whiffs in the draft again in the first round, then Andrew Berry, his future looks extremely shaky as the Browns GM. This will be his prove it year, right? Like, this will be Andrew Berry's prove it year. Some of you guys want him fired already. I don't think he's going to get fired. I'm just telling you what the situation is, right? That's going to be a prove it year for Andrew Berry. The Browns have a lot to figure out. But like I said earlier, you're never as bad as you think you are. You're never as good as you think you are. I remember during training camp this year, a lot of people looked at the Minnesota Vikings after they lost their 8th pick overall, J.J. McCarthy, and thought to themselves, well, that team's going to stink. That team's set up to fail. They're going to be awful. They're starting Sam Darnold. That's a bad team. I remember the consensus was that, hey, man, we wasted our joint practice going up against these guys. And it sounds hilarious in hindsight, but we felt like we wasted our joint practice because it was like, oh, man, the Minnesota Vikings just aren't a contest for the Browns. Turned out that the Browns were no contest for the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings ended up being the 1 seed in the NFC. Browns might be the number 1 overall pick. At that time, both sides of those statements were true for 2 separate teams. You're never as good as you think you are. We thought we were just going to roll after that 11-win season. Hell, look at a team like the Bengals, who are probably going to win like 9 games, maybe. Maybe they win 8 games. But I'm pretty sure after they made those back-to-back AFC Conference Championship appearances, they thought there'd be no chance in hell they'd have a chance to finish the season below 500 with a healthy Joe Burrow. But they might have their second under 500 season in a row in Cincinnati. You're never as good as you think you are. People counted out the Minnesota Vikings a couple of years ago. People counted out the Detroit Lions. You're never as bad as you think you are. There's always a team that gets better in the top 10. A team that goes from being in the top 10 of the draft to being in the playoffs. And there's always a team that goes from being in the playoffs to being in the top 10. We've lived both sides of those nightmares, right? The Browns have gone from a team with the top 10 pick in 2020 to a team that won a playoff game in the 2020 season. The Browns have went from a team that was in the playoffs last year to a team that might have the number 1 overall pick. Life moves fast in the NFL. And the reason life moves fast is because you're this close from being really good and you're this close from being really bad. The margins of error are really thin. And the Browns made a lot of errors. On the field, coaching, personnel-wise, they made a lot of errors. They missed a lot of kicks. They dropped a lot of passes. They fumbled a lot of footballs. They threw a lot of interceptions. And they missed a lot of wide-open receivers. And all of those things added up to be a team that won 3 contests out of 17. That's who the 2024 Cleveland Browns were. But that does not have to define the 2025 season. You have an opportunity ahead of yourself to add to what could be a great defense. I know a lot of people look at this year and say, hey, the offense was terrible. We need to draft offense. And at some point you do. But the truth is, this draft's 4 best players are defensive players. Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Will Johnson, Travis Hunter. And Travis Hunter's the closest thing to an offensive player there, but he's likely to play cornerback more times than not. That's what the draft's offering you. You got to take it, right? You can't will the draft into being something it's not. It's how you make bad selections. The draft is what the draft is. The draft has what the draft has. And if you're willing to accept that and pick within those parameters, you'll be fine. But if you try to will the draft into being something it's not, it usually ends poorly. The Browns got to make smart, patient decisions. Decisions that probably aren't going to be lauded day one. Probably aren't going to be celebrated day one. Hell, you might get ridiculed for some of these decisions. Remember how the Steelers were ridiculed on this channel by me? I ridiculed the Steelers for the Russell Wilson thing, and I wasn't alone in that, by the way. There were a lot of y'all who were with me on that. A lot of other folks who were in on that, ridiculing the Steelers for the Russell Wilson thing. They had to wait to be vindicated on that. There are going to be some moves that you're going to have to make that people are going to ridicule if you're the Cleveland Browns. That they're not going to applaud automatically. There's no way you're going to have such a great offseason visually to everybody that everybody's going to be like, oh my God, this team's fixed. People are going to have questions. They're going to have to prove it on the field that they improved. That is what this offseason is going to hold. There's not going to be a lot of people giving you the benefit of the doubt. There's going to be a lot of people who don't even want you to succeed because they don't think you should have the job. Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski's backs are against the wall this offseason. If they are who we think they are, or at least who the Browns think they are, if they are the GM and head coach to lead this franchise for the next couple decades, then they got to pull something out their hat this offseason, and they got to figure it out. Doesn't mean you got to get a franchise quarterback this year or do something like that, but you do have to put together a team that's going to make a little bit less mistakes, that's going to throw a little bit less incompletions, maybe some more accurate footballs, have wide receivers that drop the ball just a little bit less, kickers who make kicks. Think about that concept, right? A team that makes a little bit less mistakes. And if you do that, all of a sudden your win-loss record will be a lot different, because that's really ultimately the difference in every season is those small things. And those small things are what made the Browns an 11-6 football team last year. Those small things going wrong are the same thing that made us a 3-14 football team this year. This is what it takes. This is what it's about. Browns get this offseason to figure a lot of shit out. Let's see if they do it. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm excited to talk about the draft. I'm excited to talk about the free agency period and see what the Browns do here. They're going to have to find an answer for quarterback for this year. It's going to be difficult. There's no long-term answers. There's no long-term answers in the draft right now. There's no long-term answers in free agency. Maybe you get lucky and one pops out of nowhere, but more than likely, not going to be a big long-term answer. Not going to be an obvious answer. Every guy you're going to bring in at quarterback, people are going to be very skeptical about whether you draft them, whether you sign them in free agency. Somebody's not going to like that you brought that guy in. This is the offseason that the Browns are headed into. They got to make some good moves, but if they draft well, they make some good signings in free agency, they'll win games. They'll be close to a playoff team, if not a playoff team next year. So, prove it year for Andrew Berry. We'll see what he's got. If he survives the day, which I anticipate he will. Everything that I've heard says that he and Kevin are going to survive this season. So, they survived it. If they do, this is their year to prove that they are who the Browns think they are. That's my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.